Before we start, I want to say this. If you've ever been told you weren't enough because of what you do for a living, or because your life didn't look impressive from the outside, you're not alone here. This channel is a space for quiet stories, the ones that don't come with shouting or dramatic scenes, just moments that slowly change how you see yourself. If stories like that matter to you, take a second to subscribe to the channel. These videos are for people who listen closely. And if anything in this story feels familiar, like the video so more people who need it can find it, and share your thoughts in the comments, even if it's just one line. Someone else reading might feel a little less alone because of it. My name is Connie Whitmore. I'm 32 years old. And until a month ago, I believed I was standing on the edge of a life I had carefully built, slowly, honestly, without shortcuts. Not flashy, not impressive to strangers, but solid in the ways that mattered to me. I've been a high school English teacher for 8 years. I teach juniors how to argue with evidence instead of volume. I coach the debate team after school. I run the literary magazine that nobody reads until graduation, when suddenly it matters. I watch students who swear they hate books light up when they realize stories can sound like their own thoughts. I don't make executive money. I make enough. After my master's bump, I pull in around $58,000 a year. I live within my means. I save. I don't chase status symbols. I've never felt small about that, until someone I loved made me feel like it wasn't enough. His name was Ethan Caldwell. We were together for 4 years, engaged for 1. We met at a friend's birthday party, one of those crowded rooftop things where everyone's holding a plastic cup and pretending they're not checking each other's shoes. He was charming, polished, easy to talk to. Worked in pharmaceutical sales, made good money, around $95,000 with bonuses. From the start, he knew exactly what I did. I never pretended to be anything else. For a long time, I thought we were aligned. We talked about the future in that vague, reassuring way couples do when they assume details will sort themselves out. We booked a venue, sent save the dates, opened a dedicated savings account for a house down payment, mostly in my name, because I'm the one who tracks things. It didn't bother me then. The first crack appeared at a dinner party. Ethan's college friend group had this monthly rotation, couples taking turns hosting. The kind of dinners where wine bottles are lined up like trophies, and everyone pretends they're relaxed while quietly competing. That night, one of his friends was talking about his new Tesla Model S Plaid. Another couple had just come back from Aspen. Someone else mentioned a promotion, an equity bump, a corner office. I smiled when appropriate, nodded, asked polite questions. When the conversation turned to us, someone asked about our honeymoon plans. We're thinking about a road trip, I said. National parks. I've always wanted to do that. The silence that followed wasn't long, but it was sharp. Someone laughed, not cruelly, not kindly either. Roughing it, huh? One of the friends said. Bold choice. More laughter. I felt it then, the subtle shift, like I'd said something that marked me as other. Ethan laughed too, harder than he needed to. I looked at him, just for a second, waiting for him to soften it, to say something, anything. He didn't. On the drive home, he was quiet. Not tired quiet, not thoughtful quiet, the kind of quiet that feels rehearsed. When we got back to his apartment, he didn't turn on the lights. He sat down on the couch and patted the cushion beside him. We need to talk, he said. I sat. He took a breath like he was about to read from a script. I've been thinking about this for a while, he started, and I don't think I can marry you. The words landed softly, but their weight crushed the air out of my chest. What? I asked. Came out calm, too calm. I'm sorry, he said quickly. You're an incredible person. This isn't about love. That's when I knew. He hesitated, then pushed forward. You're just a teacher, Connie. My friends' wives are executives, partners, people who are going places. I stared at him. I need someone who fits the life I want, he continued. Someone my friends respect. For a moment, I thought I might cry, or yell, or do something dramatic that would justify how cruel the sentence felt. Instead, something unexpected happened. I felt relief. The knot I'd been carrying in my stomach for months, the one I'd blamed on wedding stress, loosened. Suddenly, everything made sense. The comparisons, the jokes, the way he never defended me. I sat there for 30 seconds, just processing. What about the wedding? I finally asked. The deposits? The house fund? We'll figure that out later, he said, dismissive. This is hard for me, too. The house fund. $34,000. Money I'd been saving for 3 years. Every bonus, every tax refund, every maybe next time to vacations and upgrades. The account was in my name. I made every deposit. Ethan had always had a reason not to contribute. Car payments, student loans, work expenses, the designer bag he needed for networking. I looked at him, really looked, and realized I wasn't heartbroken. I was done. I understand, I said. He blinked. That's it? Yes. I reached for the engagement ring and placed it on the coffee table between us. I don't want this anymore, I said. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I picked up my bag. Good luck, I added quietly. And then I walked out. I drove home feeling strangely calm, like a fog had lifted and I could finally see the road ahead clearly. The next morning, I went to work. My students argued about symbolism in The Great Gatsby. The debate team needed help preparing for a tournament. Life continued, steady, grounding, familiar. That evening, I logged into my bank account. The house fund was still there, $34,000, all in my name, all mine. For the first time since the engagement, I didn't feel like I was falling behind. I felt like I had stepped out of the wrong story just in time. I didn't tell anyone the engagement was over. Not that first week. I went to work the next morning like nothing had happened. Same parking spot, same chipped mug in the faculty lounge, same juniors complaining about having to annotate poetry like it was a personal attack. Routine has a way of holding you upright when everything else tilts. If anyone noticed the absence of a ring on my finger, they didn't say anything. Teachers are good at that, seeing things and letting people decide when they're ready to talk. At night, though, the silence was louder. I lay awake, replaying moments I'd brushed off for years. The comments Ethan made casually, the way he corrected me in front of his friends, the way I always seemed to be explaining my job to people who had already decided it didn't matter. And underneath all of it, there was one steady, grounding thought. I hadn't made a mistake leaving. The house fund sat there quietly, unchanged. $34,000. I logged into the account every few days, not because I needed to, but because seeing it reminded me of something important. Every deposit told a story. Summer school checks, extra tutoring, a bonus I got for taking on curriculum work no one else wanted. Every dollar was proof of discipline, of planning, of believing in a future even when no one else was contributing to it. Ethan never asked how much was in the account. Not really. He liked the idea of it, liked saying we were saving, liked the security of knowing something solid existed without ever having to be the one to build it. I remembered the conversations clearly now. I'll start contributing once my bonus clears. This month's a little tight. You're just better at saving than I am. I'd told myself partnerships weren't always 50-50. What I hadn't realized was how easily imbalance becomes entitlement. 3 days after I left, Ethan texted me. Ethan, we should talk about the money. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Not us, not what happened, the money. I didn't respond. The next message came an hour later. Ethan, I don't think it's fair for you to just walk away like this. Fair. That word again. On the 4th day, he called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was tight, controlled, trying to sound reasonable. Connie, we need to be adults about this. The house fund was for our future. You can't just take it and disappear. Call me. I deleted the voicemail. Not out of spite, out of clarity. The account was in my name, always had been. There was no joint agreement, no shared deposits, no written understanding beyond conversations that conveniently blurred responsibility. I hadn't taken anything. I had simply stopped pretending. By the end of the week, the pressure escalated. Ethan's sister texted me. Sister, Ethan's really struggling. You blindsided him. Can you at least talk to him? Blindsided. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Instead, I turned my phone face down and opened my laptop. I needed facts, not feelings. I pulled up every bank statement from the past 3 years, highlighted my deposits, saved copies, screenshots, dates, amounts, patterns. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Because people who feel entitled to your labor rarely stop at asking politely. That Friday afternoon, I got an email from the wedding venue. Subject line, contract clarification. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but recognition. Ethan had reached out to them. They were just checking on the status of the booking. Mentioned there was some confusion about next steps. The contract had both our names on it, but the payment history told a simpler story. I forwarded the email to myself, flagged it, made a note to call them Monday. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I breathed. For the first time since the engagement ended, I wasn't reacting. I was moving. That night, I poured a glass of water, just water, and sat at my kitchen table with a notebook. I made a list. Not of grievances, of actions. Secure finances. Cancel shared obligations. Set boundaries. Say nothing unless necessary. It felt almost boring, and that's how I knew it was right. The following Monday, I called the venue. I didn't dramatize, didn't overshare. I paid the deposit, I said calmly. I can provide documentation. The coordinator sighed softly, like she'd heard versions of this before. We'll need to review it with management, she said. But yes, send over your statements. I did. By the end of the call, I felt lighter. Not because it was resolved, but because I was no longer pretending I owed anyone access to my future. Ethan texted again that night. Ethan, you're being really cold about this. I read it once. Then I archived the conversation. Cold was what people called you when you stopped negotiating your worth. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was simply done subsidizing a life that didn't respect me. And somewhere between grading essays and tracking refunds, it became clear. This wasn't about money. Money was just the first thing he tried to take when he realized he couldn't take me for granted anymore. The venue called me back 2 days later. I was sitting in my classroom during lunch, half a sandwich on my desk, a stack of essays waiting to be graded. The room still smelled faintly of dry erase markers and teenage impatience. Hi, Connie, the coordinator said, her voice professional but warm. We reviewed your payment records. And? I asked. You're correct. The full deposit came from your card. I closed my eyes briefly, not in relief, more in confirmation. There is one complication, she continued. The contract lists both names. Normally, we require signatures from both parties to cancel. I expected that. What are my options? I asked. She hesitated. If one party refuses to cooperate, the person who paid can dispute the deposit. There's an administrative fee, but the majority would be refunded. How much would I lose? About $1,000? I did the math automatically. $3,500 down, $2,500 back. Not ideal, but clean. Let's proceed, I said. She didn't sound surprised. I'll email you the paperwork. When I hung up, I realized something uncomfortable. I hadn't once felt tempted to ask Ethan for permission. That was new. The photographer was easier. The contract was in my name only. $800. Fully refundable within 30 days. I'm sorry things didn't work out, she said gently over the phone. Thank you, I replied, and meant it. The DJ followed, $400 back, no questions asked. Piece by piece, the wedding dismantled itself, not with drama, but with logistics. I kept a running spreadsheet. Venue, pending refund. Photographer, refunded. DJ, refunded. Each line felt like reclaiming oxygen. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. Ethan, you canceled the photographer without talking to me? I didn't answer. Another message followed. Ethan, this is my wedding too. I stared at the words. Was. That night, he showed up at my apartment. I hadn't told him where I'd moved after leaving his place, but mutual friends had. It wasn't hard to trace. I didn't open the door right away. I stood on the other side, listening to his breathing through the wood. Impatient, controlled, familiar. Connie, he said, can we talk? I opened the door just enough to look at him. He looked irritated more than hurt, like someone who'd lost control of a situation he thought was managed. You're canceling everything without me, he said. That's not how partnerships work. I leaned against the door frame. This stopped being a partnership when you told me I wasn't good enough to marry, I said calmly. That's not what I said. I met his eyes. It is exactly what you said. He exhaled sharply. You're twisting things. No, I replied. I'm remembering them accurately. His jaw tightened. You're being unreasonable. You're taking money that was meant for both of us. I'm reclaiming money I saved, I said. There's a difference. Silence stretched between us. He shifted tactics. You know people are asking questions, he said. This makes me look bad. That was the moment. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. I'm not managing your reputation anymore, I said. I'm managing my life. He stared at me, like he'd never heard those words before. So that's it, he asked? Yes. He waited. For something. An apology. A negotiation. It didn't come. Eventually, he stepped back. Fine, he said. Do whatever you want. I closed the door. A week later, the venue refund hit my account. $9,157. I updated the spreadsheet. Total recovered so far, $3,700. I stared at the number for a moment, then closed the file, because the real recovery wasn't financial. It was internal. I had spent years smoothing things over, explaining, accommodating, making myself smaller so someone else could feel taller. Canceling the wedding alone wasn't lonely. It was honest. And honesty, I was learning, was quieter than performance, but far more powerful. The idea came to me on a Tuesday night, not in a dramatic, eat, pray, love way. No breakdown, no wine-fueled spiral. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, bank account on one tab, airline prices on another. The apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I had money. Not reckless money, not prove-a-point money. Just available money. The house fund sat intact. $34,000. The wedding refunds were trickling back in. I hadn't spent a cent of it yet, partly out of habit, partly out of disbelief that for once, nothing was earmarked for someone else. I stared at a photo of Rome on my screen. The Colosseum at golden hour. Stone worn smooth by centuries of people who had lived entire lives before I existed. I'd always wanted to go. Ethan hated the idea of long trips that didn't come with prestige attached. He liked resorts, curated experiences, places you could name drop casually at dinner. Italy had always been my idea. I booked it in one sitting. 2 weeks, Rome, Florence, Venice. Business class flights. Something I'd never even clicked on before because it felt indulgent in a way I'd trained myself to avoid. Hotels I didn't have to justify. Restaurants I'd saved for someday. $8,000. When the confirmation email landed in my inbox, I didn't feel guilty. I felt steady. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not my colleagues, not my friends, certainly not Ethan. I packed quietly. Comfortable shoes, a notebook, one dress I liked because I liked it, not because it fit into a certain image. On the plane, I watched the city lights fade below me and realized something unsettling. No one was texting me asking where I was. No one needed me to explain myself. Rome was loud and alive and completely uninterested in my past. I walked until my feet hurt, ate alone without feeling awkward, sat in churches and museums and cafes where no one knew what I did for a living, or cared. I didn't feel lonely. I felt anonymous in the best possible way. On the fourth day, I posted a single photo. The Colosseum, sunlight spilling through the arches. Caption: sometimes the best journeys start when you stop going in the wrong direction. I didn't tag anyone, didn't explain, didn't follow it up. My phone exploded anyway. Messages from mutual friends. Ethan's sister. People who hadn't checked in for months suddenly concerned. Friend, this feels pointed. Sister, are you trying to hurt Ethan? Ethan, this is incredibly immature. I read them all. Then I blocked the thread, ordered another glass of wine, watched the sky darken over Rome. Being just a teacher felt surprisingly luxurious when no one was grading my worth. I stayed offline for the rest of the trip. When I flew home, I was tan, rested, and strangely optimistic, like someone who'd stepped out of a narrow hallway into open air. The first thing I did was laundry. The second was lesson planning. Routine again. Familiar. Grounding. Then the stories started reaching me. Apparently, Ethan had been telling people a different version of events. That I'd blindsided him. That I was intimidated by his success. That I'd walked away from the engagement because I couldn't handle it. His mother called my mother. That conversation didn't go the way she hoped. But the most interesting part wasn't the lies themselves. It was how quickly they unraveled. People started asking questions. Quiet ones, side channel ones. Because the timeline didn't add up. Because money leaves a paper trail. Because my absence was calm, not chaotic. A week after I got back, my phone rang. It was a friend of mine, married to one of Ethan's college friends. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said, but he thought you'd fight for him. I closed my eyes. He told everyone you were just taking a break, she continued, that you'd come around. When you posted from Italy, he lost it. I didn't feel smug. I felt tired, because I finally understood something. He hadn't expected me to leave. He'd expected me to negotiate. And that misunderstanding, more than anything else, was what shattered his version of the story. It arrived on a Thursday. Plain white envelope. No return address that meant anything to me. Just my name, typed neatly, like this was routine business. I opened it standing in my kitchen, backpack still slung over one shoulder, shoes half off. The kind of moment that usually comes with bills or PTA flyers. Not this. Formal notice of demand. I read it once, then again. Ethan was seeking the return of shared assets, including $17,000, representing his equitable share of the house fund. Additional claims related to financial contributions made during the relationship. I let out a short laugh before I could stop myself, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I sat down at the table and read the letter slowly, carefully this time. The language was confident, authoritative, designed to intimidate. It talked about fairness, about expectations, about how long-term relationships implied shared ownership, even without written agreements. What it didn't mention was a single deposit he'd made. Not one. I didn't panic. I didn't call him. I called Mara, a friend from college who now did contract law. We hadn't spoken in months, but she picked up on the second ring. "Tell me everything," she said. I did, calmly, chronologically, no embellishment. She listened, asked a few questions. Then she laughed. "This is nonsense," she said. "The account is solely in your name. You funded it entirely. There's no cohabitation agreement, no written contract, no proof of intent to share ownership." "What about the length of the relationship?" I asked. "Doesn't matter," she said. "Courts don't split savings accounts based on vibes." That got a smile out of me. "And the engagement?" I asked. "You returned the ring," she said, "which, frankly, makes you look even better." I exhaled. "So what now?" "I'll draft a response," she said. "Clear, professional, boring, explaining why his claims have no merit. If he actually wants to sue, he can waste money he doesn't have." "How much do I owe you?" "300, she said. "Friends and family rate. Worth every cent." The response went out the next day. And then, nothing. No follow-up, no escalation, no court filing. Just silence. The bluff had been called. I didn't celebrate, didn't tell anyone. I filed the letter away with my bank statements and moved on. Or at least I tried to, because Ethan wasn't finished. That Saturday morning, I was at my usual coffee shop, grading papers. Same corner table, same oat milk latte, same barista who knew my order and never asked questions. I looked up when the bell over the door chimed, and there he was. Ethan, with his sister. Not a coincidence. He spotted me instantly, straightened his jacket, walked over like this was a planned confrontation, not an ambush. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't stand. "I don't think we do." "You got a lawyer involved?" he asked, voice tight. "Seriously? This is what we've become?" I closed my notebook. "You sent me a lawyer letter demanding $17,000, I said. "What did you expect?" His sister stepped in. "She's just trying to make sure things are fair." I looked at her. "Were we building a life together?" I asked. "Or was I just funding one?" She blinked. Because here was the detail that hadn't made it into his version of the story. "He told me I was just a teacher," I said. "That he needed someone his friends would respect." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. That's exactly what you said," I interrupted. Calm, precise, word for word. His sister looked between us. "You didn't contribute to the house fund," I added. "Not once." Her face changed. "Is that true?" "That's not the point," Ethan snapped. "It kind of is," I said. Silence. Ethan grabbed his sister's arm. "Let's go. She's obviously not going to be reasonable." I met his eyes. "I've been very reasonable," I said. "I'm just not giving you money that was never yours." They left. The barista slid a muffin onto my table without a word. I smiled at her, picked up my pen, went back to grading. Because somewhere along the way, I'd learned this. People don't bring lawyers into things they're confident about. They do it when control is slipping, and they don't know how else to get it back. The school year had a rhythm to it. September always did. New faces, new energy, juniors who pretended they didn't care, seniors who pretended they weren't terrified. The debate team buzzed with first tournament nerves. The literary magazine submissions came in uneven and raw and hopeful. Work anchored me, not as an escape, but as proof that my life hadn't collapsed just because one relationship had. I hadn't planned on dating. I wasn't swearing it off dramatically. I just wasn't looking. The idea of small talk, of explaining myself again, felt exhausting. Then the debate tournament happened. It was a Saturday. Early. Too much coffee. Folding tables lining the gym like an obstacle course of arguments and clipboards. Judges checking in, students pacing, teachers pretending not to hover. I was organizing ballots when someone stepped up beside me. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you know where room C is?" I turned. He was tall, a little rumpled, like he'd come straight from something demanding and hadn't had time to smooth himself out. Not flashy, not polished, just present. "Down the hall, second door on the left," I said. "Thanks," he replied, then paused. "Are you one of the coaches?" "I am." He smiled. "Good. Then I'm in the right place." We didn't talk again until later. During a break between rounds, he ended up next to me in the hallway, both of us leaning against the wall, scrolling our phones like people avoiding eye contact on purpose. "So," he said, "what do you teach?" There it was, the question that usually came with a flicker of judgment. "English," I said, bracing myself. His face lit up. "No way," he said. "That's incredible." I blinked. "It is?" "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. Those teachers changed my life. No pause, no qualifiers. No, that's nice layered with pity. Just respect. I'm Daniel, he added. I'm here judging when I can. Volunteer thing. Connie, I said, coach, occasional referee. He laughed. We talked for 10 minutes. About books. About how debate teaches kids to think, not just argue. About how exhausting teenagers are in the best way. Only then did he mention his job. I work at the university hospital, he said casually. Residency. I nodded. That sounds intense. He made a face. That's one word for it. He didn't elaborate, didn't posture, didn't make it his identity. When the tournament ended, he hesitated. Would you like to get coffee sometime? He asked. No pressure. There was something in his tone that made the answer easy. Sure, I said. Coffee turned into another coffee. Then dinner. Then walks that lasted longer than planned. On our third date, he asked about my past relationship. I gave him the short version. He said he couldn't marry me because I was just a teacher, I said. Daniel laughed, not mockingly, genuinely incredulous. I make more money than my attending did at my age, he said. And I'm miserable half the time. I raised an eyebrow. You know what success is? He continued. Waking up and not dreading your day. You have that. Most people don't. I didn't know what to say, so I kissed him. He kissed me back. It felt easy. No performance. No measuring. No keeping score. A few weeks later, through mutual friends, I heard how things were unraveling on Ethan's side. The couples he'd once compared us to weren't doing so well. The financial analyst never came home. The startup guy got laid off. The marketing executive was having an affair. The dinner parties stopped. The scoreboard vanished. Ethan had started dating again, chasing what he thought he wanted, the kind of person his friends admired. None of it lasted. I didn't feel satisfied by that. I felt free. Because for the first time, I was with someone who didn't ask me to justify my worth. He saw it, and that changed everything. I didn't know Ethan would be there. If I had, I probably still would have gone, but I would have worn different shoes. Something steadier, something grounded. It was a holiday party at a friend's house. Not a close friend of mine, not really. One of those overlapping social circles that linger long after relationships end. I hesitated before saying yes, then decided I wouldn't keep shrinking my world just to avoid running into someone from my past. Daniel offered to come with me. We don't have to stay long, he said. We can make an appearance and escape. I smiled. Deal. He showed up at my place straight from the hospital. Scrubs swapped for jeans and a sweater, his ID badge still clipped to his bag because he'd forgotten to take it off. He apologized for it like it was a flaw. I liked that about him. The house was already loud when we arrived. Music playing too softly to matter. Laughter spilling into the hallway. Coats piled in a way that suggested no one planned on leaving early. I spotted Ethan almost immediately. He was standing near the kitchen island, drink in hand, posture stiff. He looked good, on paper. Tailored jacket, clean haircut. The version of himself he liked to present to people who mattered. His eyes found me. Then Daniel. I felt the shift before I saw it. Not jealousy exactly, more like recalculation. My friend's wife noticed the pause and stepped in with forced cheer. Oh, Connie, hi, you made it, and this must be... Daniel, he said, extending his hand. Nice to meet you. Ethan shook it a little too firmly. And you know Ethan already, she added, too late to stop herself. Daniel glanced between us, polite and unbothered. I do now. Someone nearby asked the inevitable question. So what do you do, Daniel? He shrugged lightly. I'm a resident. Pediatrics. There it was. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. I felt it. The way the room recalibrated. The way certain people leaned in, suddenly interested. The way the metrics shifted. That's impressive, someone said. Daniel smiled. Mostly it's exhausting. I felt Ethan's gaze on me then. Sharp, searching. As if he were trying to solve an equation that no longer made sense. Later in the evening, Daniel went to refill his drink. I stayed near the window, watching snow collect along the edge of the porch light. That's when Ethan approached. He seems nice, he said. I didn't respond. You moved on fast, he added. 6 months isn't fast, I replied. It's healthy. He hesitated. I've been thinking about what I said. Maybe I was harsh. I turned to face him. You weren't harsh, I said. You were honest. He frowned. I didn't mean it like... Yes, you did, I said calmly. And that's okay. You told me exactly what you valued. I just didn't fit. Daniel returned then, sliding in beside me naturally, his hand finding mine without effort. Ready? He asked. I'm on call in 6 hours, and I'd really like to sleep. I smiled. Yeah. As we grabbed our coats, Ethan watched us, not with anger, with something closer to disbelief. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Daniel exhaled, shoulders dropping. "That was your ex," he said. "How could you tell?" "The way he looked at you," Daniel replied, like he was doing math and didn't like the answer. I laughed. As we walked to the car, my car, a used sedan I'd bought years ago and never apologized for, Daniel stopped me. "Hey," he said. "Yeah? That house fund you mentioned once," he said. "You still have it?" "Most of it." He nodded thoughtfully. "My lease is up in a few months. Maybe we could start looking at places together. No pressure." I looked at him, really looked. This man who didn't measure me by titles, who didn't flinch at my choices, who thought I was the impressive one. "I'd like that," I said. We drove off into the quiet. Behind us, a chapter closed. In front of us, something steady began. We didn't rush anything. That surprised people. After everything I'd been through, there was an assumption that moving forward meant moving fast, as if stability only counted when it came with milestones you could announce. Daniel and I ignored that. We dated quietly. Weeknight dinners that ended early because one of us had work in the morning. Walks that didn't need destinations. Conversations that didn't feel like interviews. He never asked me to explain my choices. He asked about my students, about what books I loved teaching and which ones bored me. He listened when I talked, not like he was waiting for his turn, but like the details mattered. And slowly, almost without noticing, we started talking about logistics. Not dreams, not fantasies. Life. His lease was ending in a few months. Mine wasn't, but my place was small and temporary in a way I'd never admitted out loud. One evening, we were sitting on my couch, paperwork spread between us, his residency schedule, my school calendar, when the topic came up naturally. "We don't have to decide anything now," he said. "I just want to be honest about where I'm headed." I nodded. Me too. There was no grand declaration, no pressure, just two adults mapping realities. When we started looking at houses, it didn't feel like a performance. No bragging, no comparisons, no trying to win an imaginary competition. We wanted something modest. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, good schools, not because of resale value, but because of community. When the conversation turned to money, I braced myself out of habit. Daniel noticed. "Hey," he said gently, "we'll do this fairly." "I have more saved," I said automatically. "I know," he replied, "and I don't want that to matter." I looked at him. "It kind of does." He shook his head. "Not the way you think." We sat at the kitchen table with calculators and notes, working through numbers like teammates, not adversaries. In the end, he insisted on splitting the down payment evenly. "We're partners," he said. "That means equal." I didn't argue. Not because I couldn't, but because this time, equality wasn't something I had to fight for. We bought the house 3 months later. Nothing flashy, no announcement post, no champagne photos with oversized keys. Just a closing date and a handshake. Moving day was chaos. Daniel's colleagues from the hospital showed up between shifts. My teacher friends arrived with coffee and tools they didn't know how to use. Someone brought pizza. Someone else brought a cooler. There was laughter, sweat, boxes labeled badly. It felt like a community, not a competition. That night, we lay on a mattress on the floor. Furniture delivery delayed, exhausted in the best way. Daniel turned to me. "You happy?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said, "really happy." "Good," he replied. "Me too." There was no applause, no scoreboard, just peace. Later, through the grapevine, I heard about Ethan. His sister reached out to me unexpectedly, weeks after the party. She apologized for the coffee shop, for believing his version of events. She said things hadn't gone well for him since. The relationships he chased looked good on paper and collapsed in practice. The life he thought he wanted kept slipping just out of reach. Apparently, he'd struggled the most after seeing me settled. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't needed to. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt distant. Because success, I'd learned, wasn't about impressing people who were already busy measuring each other. It was about building something quiet and real, with someone who never asked you to be more than you already were. Life didn't change all at once. It settled. Mornings became predictable in the best way. Daniel left early for the hospital most days, careful not to wake me. I stayed behind, grading papers at the kitchen table, sunlight slowly filling the room. There was no sense of performance anymore. No one was keeping score. When people asked about us, I didn't dress it up. "We're doing well," I said, and that was enough. Sometimes the contrast hit me unexpectedly. 4 years with Ethan, and not once did he contribute financially to the future he insisted we were building. He talked about our life as if it were something that arrived automatically, earned by proximity, not effort. With Daniel, everything was intentional. Conversations about money weren't tense. They were practical, equal, honest. No assumptions, no entitlement. That difference mattered more than any title ever could. I heard updates about Ethan through the usual channels, mutual acquaintances, vague mentions at gatherings. He moved to another state, took a job that paid less, but promised better balance, told people he was reevaluating priorities. Maybe he was. Or maybe the world he'd built on comparison finally ran out of numbers that made him feel ahead. Either way, I didn't feel curious anymore. When Ethan told me I was just a teacher, he meant it as a limitation, as something small he'd eventually outgrow. But being just a teacher meant I had a life that didn't require translation. It meant I went to work with purpose, came home without resentment, built a future with someone who never asked me to justify my worth. One evening, Daniel leaned against the counter watching me pack lunches for the next day. "You ever think about getting married again?" he asked, casually, not testing, just asking. I smiled. "Only if it looks like this," I said. He nodded. "Good. Because love isn't just about staying. It's about respect, shared values, and choosing someone who never mistakes your profession for your value. I'm still just a teacher, and I've never been happier." People like neat endings. They want a clear winner, a downfall, a redemption arc they can point to and say, "See, that's how it's supposed to go." Life doesn't really work that way. What it gives you instead is clarity, if you're willing to sit with it. A year after the engagement ended, someone asked me if I regretted how things happened, if I wished I'd fought harder, explained myself better, tried to be more impressive. I didn't have to think about it. No, I said. Because nothing about that relationship failed suddenly. It had been misaligned for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to admit that love without respect slowly turns into negotiation, and negotiation is exhausting. Ethan didn't leave me because I was a teacher. He left because he needed an audience, and I was done performing. Daniel never asked me to be smaller or louder or different. He didn't introduce me with qualifiers. He didn't frame my job like a stepping stone to something better. He saw my life as complete, not provisional. That mattered. We didn't rush into anything dramatic. No social media announcements. No grand gestures designed for outside approval. When he proposed, it was quiet. At home, no witnesses, no spectacle. Just a simple question asked by someone who already knew the answer. I said yes. We're planning a small ceremony. Family, friends, people who actually show up when things aren't shiny. No competition, no hierarchy, no one keeping score. Sometimes I still hear the phrase in my head, "Just a teacher," and I smile. Because being just a teacher means I spend my days helping young people find their voices instead of silencing my own. It means I go to work with purpose and come home to peace. It means I built a future carefully, honestly, without needing validation from people who were too busy measuring themselves against others. Ethan wanted someone his friends would respect. I wanted someone who would respect me. We both got exactly what we chose. I'm still just a teacher, and I finally understand how much that's worth.